Gym Makers presents the Beyond Brilliant broadcast, where we empower ladies and leaders to shine in their brilliant zone. Join your hosts, Dr. Nicole Steele and Dr. Dee Parker, as they share their secrets to help you gain clarity, build confidence, and unleash your courage. If you're ready to get connected, gain insight, spark your creativity, be inspired, and embrace your brilliance, grab a pen and a friend, and let's get started. Welcome to another episode of the Beyond Brilliant broadcast. I know you see that we are located somewhere different. We always say, we always say that we can do this because like Tabitha Brown said, it's our business to move ourselves. It's our business. So today we decided that we're going to be virtual in our virtual studio. I'm Dr. Dee Parker, and I'm the Courage Catalyst, and I'm that hand on your back that pushes you out of your comfort zone, honey, all the way into your courage zone. And I am joined by my amazing purpose partner. You see her over there. I know you see her. Introduce yourself to the people. Say, hey, girl.
Hey, girl. Hey, this is Dr. Nicole Steele, the confidence coach. And I am that voice in your ear reminding you of who and whose you are. And as always, Dr. D, I tell you, we have the pleasure of having the very best guest in all the world. And today we will not disappoint. We shall not start disappointing now. I am excited about the sister that we get to introduce to our Beyond Brilliant audience. Many of them may know her because we've been rolling with her in various capacities and doing collaborative projects for years. But many of our viewing audience may be introduced to this brilliant gem for the very first time. So I'm going to let you do the honors and introduce our guest today.
I don't even know if I can do the honors because this sister right here, this sister right here is a multifaceted beauty, honey. When we talk about beyond brilliant, she is totally beyond brilliant. Tara Gay, oh my goodness. I'm just going to give them a little bit of what you do, and you're going to fill in all of the other things that you do. This woman has over 20 years of professional experience, including an extensive background in national service leadership, training, consulting, organizational, and entrepreneurial knowledge. This woman brings a host of knowledge and education. Her whole educational background, I can't even do it justice because it's running off the page here, but all of the things that she does. Not only does she dabble in all of the things that I just said, but she is an authoress. This woman is a speaker. She is a podcast host. The list goes on. So Tara Gay, welcome to Beyond Brilliant. Please tell our viewing audience what they don't know, the things that I just said, and introduce yourself the way that you would if somebody called you up on the stage of who you are, girl.
Well, I thank you both, ladies and sisters, for having me today for this show. And I will tell you, honestly, Dee, one of the things that always strikes me when people have bios read, and certainly when they read mine, when I come to the stage, I merely say I am but a vessel, and I am pleasantly able to be humbled enough to be used for a greater purpose than my own. And so that really and truly is who I am. No greater than that. All the other things just speak to how old I am as opposed to necessarily who I am. But I certainly will say really and truly what I most think about myself when I am introducing myself is merely that I am but a vessel with nothing necessarily different or special than anyone else, just connected to a higher purpose, and staying connected to that purpose is who I am.
It looks good on you. That purpose looks good on you.
Thank you. Yes. That's a little purpose match with a little Mac, so I'll give it credit too.
I love it.
So, Dr. D, I know that we are wanting to spend our time together talking about something that is near and dear to all three of us, and that is the state of the woman. And so I know that you have some alarming statistics that you're going to share with our listeners?
You're absolutely right, Dr. Nicole. The world has been through a lot, and women, and especially women of color, have faced some incredible challenges and have been really forced to like overcome some unexpected personal and professional obstacles. And so when you think about just some of the stats, when we look at moms, right? 3 in 10 mothers have considered downshifting their careers or leaving the workforce. And we're seeing that by droves. People are making an option or an alternative choice, right? Whether or not to return to the workforce, and particularly women of color, because of the microaggressions that they experience. And when you think, just to give you another stat, when you look at women of color, 49%, I want that just let this sink in. And this comes in from our partners at Lean In. 49% of Black women feel that their race or ethnicity will make it harder for them to get raises, promotions, the chance to get ahead, compared to 3% of white women and 11% of women overall. And that's just, we're looking at the state of corporate America. That's just a couple of stats. The stats go on and on and on about the impact that the world has on women today. So this conversation is so important because I know our guest, Tara Gay, has a lot to offer in this space and has been a voice and a champion and an echo chamber, if you will, for women of color, people of color out here in these streets, honey. So I want to invite you into this conversation and talk a little bit about your reaction to what you're seeing when we think about some of the challenges women have faced due to the pandemic, due to social and political, all kinds of stuff. So I want to give you a chance to chime in on this conversation.
So a couple of things that come to mind, and it started in terms of just some thoughts that I was having when someone over the weekend, I was in an institute with some people and someone was talking about Black women being resilient. And on Sunday evening, I started beginning to think about what if we didn't have to be resilient, but were just allowed to be remarkable? What if we didn't have to come back from something and all these other things that have been barriers set up before us, and we just got to be remarkable in the spaces that we were in, that we got to think about all the things that were possible for us as opposed to all the things that are set up against the possibilities that are for us. And so I really do think that part of what I am trying to do is to help to alleviate the belief or this idea that we actually are better because we take on all of these burdens as women, and especially as Black women. You all alluded to the podcast we have, which is called The Weight of the Cape, which is essentially about this idea that Black women are these heroines. And although we recognize we are certainly been heroines throughout history, throughout current times, but certainly we have also been perceived as these superhuman and super women at the cost really to our humanity in this process, to our sanity in this process, and to our right to actually just be women throughout this process. And so one of the things I definitely say for me, I hope that we are going to be able to get into tonight is what happens if we begin to say for ourselves, we actually do not wish to be magic, because magic is the mastery of illusion. And even when we tell ourselves we are Black girl magic, we don't even realize we've set ourselves up for something that is not really attainable. We shouldn't have to be magicians in order for us to actually attain or have someone believe in our power. We should just simply be powerful. We should be Black girl power, not necessarily magic, because that again is an elusive thing, or the mastery of illusion. And what we see when we unmask all the things that Black women do is that we actually are living out these illusions of that we have it together, that we are okay. I joked about the makeup today, but even part of that is a part of allowing people to believe we have it together because we look together. Mm-hmm. So it is that I really hope that we can begin to unpack for women, and especially Black women, so that they are allowed to have the true and fullness of their humanity, as opposed to these weights that are placed upon them that says they must carry it all for all people.
Yes, and yes, and yes. Bling, 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 bling.
She's dropping them, honey. She's dropping them. And one thing I want to say, just imagining a world where Black and brown women in particular, but women in general, began to rethink that and stand in a new space, I think about how empowering that is for the next generation.
Yes.
You know, we have passed on. I mean, you think about it, all of us somewhere in our family over the years have heard about being a strong Black woman and, you know, women need to hold their own and all of that. And that has been a great attribute. When I think about my grandmothers and my great grandmothers, I mean, they were strong and they were resilient. They lived in different times, but they passed that down to my parents and passed that down to me. And I have unconsciously passed that down to my children. Just imagine if we as a people, as a body said, we're stopping that here. We're stopping it right now. And we don't want to be resilient. We want to be remarkable.
Yes. And I love what Sarah said about that.
Yes, I was going to just give credit to another sister who said, and I told her I would give her credit when I repeated it because I thought it was just profound. Dr. Dietrich Hawkins said, trauma that is not transformed is transferred. And I think that's where we are. We are generations that has continuously not been able to transform the conditions of our minds, our bodies, and our spirits from the trauma that was placed upon us. That was not just limited to being enslaved in America. There certainly is trauma that if you go globally, you look at spaces where trauma has filled the conditions of what women have experienced, from being over-sexualized to being abused to being, again, overused in certain scenarios. And so, again, if we had the opportunity for this generation to begin the transformation of that trauma versus the transference of that trauma, then we certainly have the power to actually cultivate a new generation of women who see themselves differently than other people have given them the opportunities to kind of exist in this world. So I definitely think that is the work that we have. And again, I give credit to the sister who said it. It is in the power of transformation that versus transference of those traumas that we have faced that you're alluding to, Nicole.
And you're absolutely right, because what we like to say here is trauma has tentacles, and tentacles reach deep into the generations. And that what you're saying is so powerful. And I remember, I love my mama. My mama is amazing. She is she's my shero. I remember growing up, and when things would get hard or whatever experience that we were going through, my mother used to call me her survivor. And it did something to me. She did not intend it to do anything to me, but I took that on as an expectation. And I had to always be the survivor. I couldn't crumble. I couldn't let, my guard down. I always had to be strong because she thought of me as her survivor. So going back into the conversation of what you were talking about and how that transfers into generations and girls living up to that expectation, how do we now think differently about that? How do we help women think differently about that? How do we help girls come from that as well?
I think part of the work, and I think, having been a language arts teacher, I often think about the power of language and words. And sometimes the way in which we think we are providing support through our words. And we're actually, as you said, Dee, creating a foundation that people feel like they have to live up to. And so I recall being younger because I just didn't necessarily cry at films. And I remember being younger, being told by my mom that I was like Steel. Oh, she's not going to cry. She's Steel. And then what it told me is you actually don't have permission now to cry, because everybody has an expectation that you can get through this without your tears. So it wasn't until much later, until probably my mid-20s, that I actually would cry at a movie. And I actually would fight tears when I felt something in a film or I had a connection, because again, I felt like I did not have permission. Now, her intent behind that was not to put me in a cage of steel and tell me that I had to lock my feelings away. But what it said to me is, oh, this feels like what is a compliment. So now I have to live up to this compliment that has been bestowed upon me. I have to be still.
Yes.
But what I also realized is that which is strong is not necessarily invincible. And so you have to be able to get to a place of that vulnerability that allows for you to have a release for those emotions. Because what we also learned through COVID and all these other things is the health of Black women is
Come
so
on.
often diminished because of the things we retain that we don't even realize how internally they manifest in our bodies and make us sick.
Yes.
I remember being in college many years ago, many years ago, and I did a study on the mitochondrial DNA of enslaved women during the Middle Passage. And that was a mutation that happened that allowed for them to retain salt water without becoming ill. But what we found is the longer the passage took them, which meant by the time they got to the American shores, most of the Black people that you see here, there's a linkage back to how we have high blood pressure, because that mutation saved us during the Middle Passage, but it then cursed us once we got here. And we were also given foods that were higher in salt content based on the quality or lack of quality of the food that was provided to enslaved people. So that is, again, one of those things that we see. We will mutate ourselves from a moment of survival, but that moment of surviving then becomes the thing that may leave us to perish in later situations, because we haven't understood what are the other environmental things that come into play that now have an impact on the mutation we took or made for ourselves at an earlier age. And so those are the kinds of things that I think that, again, if we get into the deeper exploration and we ask the questions for Black women, when was the first time that perhaps either your heart was broken? When was the first time that you noticed that someone saw you in a way that you had not seen yourself and you didn't have an appreciation for that, yet you had an awareness come about it? Like, those are the kinds of things that we begin to give them the tools to speak and to give language and voice to those things, so that those things also don't carry on as the mutations that later in life destroy us, because we didn't realize we no longer needed that mutation because we had already survived the worst of the conditions that caused the mutation to happen in the first place. So that is what I would say for us as Black women. I would love us to get to that place. Where were our mutations and what was the cause of mutation? What did we survive as a result of needing to mutate? But now do we have a different survival mechanism that relies or requires us to move beyond that and heal the mutation?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Drop it, drop it, drop it. Is it inappropriate to say I have a crush on your brain and all your gifts? Is it?
No, but you know why? Because this isn't mine. I truly am. And that's why I always laugh. And Nicole, who's known me for years, I will say, well, I hope you take that, because I don't know what I just said, because I actually really do believe that I come into these spaces asking the ancestors to give me guidance and the tools to be able to have the articulation that expresses their journey to who we are and how we can move forward as a people. So a lot of times it is not me. So the crush you may have is on a higher being and is on a light of God. So you can go ahead and crush all you want to, because I think that's appropriate.
I love it. I love it. You know, I want to just sit in this space for a little bit longer, because like we say here on the Beyond Brilliant broadcast, you are throwing gems at people. You are knocking folks out with all of the gems and all the knowledge that you are sharing. But you struck a nerve with me, because I know we're in this space and have been for some time, really talking about a couple of things specifically in the Black and Brown community. I think about counseling, a topic that has been taboo for so long. Black people, not all, but many, just feeling like, me and my prayers, we got it. I don't need counseling. I don't need help. That mindset. But in addition to that, we're in a space that is pushing and encouraging self-care. And so when you talk, just as you did, about tracing back the trauma, tracing back those things, I'm thinking about, even in my life, in many women's life, we can usually trace that back to one time in life where we had to survive, where we had to suck it up, where we had to get up and pull it all together and keep moving, whether that's loss, whether that's having, been raised in single parent homes, if it's heartbreak, whatever it is. But that becomes our norm because we had to do it out of survival as a young person. I'm thinking about young people who are taken advantage of, and molested, and then you have to pack that down and get it together. But then we end up walking through life, just mutating that, just continuing it in every area of life. And it's so powerful for you to break it down the way that you have, because I shudder to think how many women are tuned in. Yeah. And they take the time to pause, to stop the busyness, to get quiet, to open up their hearts for God to heal them, what they would uncover, what they would truly uncover.
Woo. And to that point, Nicole, two things I would say. One, what you would uncover, but what you will also forgive.
Yes.
Whether it is forgiveness extended to someone who broke your heart, or for the moment that you needed to forgive yourself for the fact that you needed to survive whatever it was that moved you forward. So I do think that is something that has to be addressed, the power of forgiveness that comes first for you and then extends out to other people. If you're one who can extend that grace first to someone else and then have to work on how you do it for yourself, then certainly being able to do that. I say the second part to that is also, I think quite honestly, there was a mutation even in Black and brown communities to say that it had to only be faith, because quite honestly, faith was the only thing that was given to us as a permission. We were given permission to have so-called church and campgrounds and all of those things. But what we were not given permission to is, again, the fullness of our humanity, which would have required you also had health be provided to people. And so, again, this whole notion of health and mental health was also a part of the things that were denied you. So it almost became like in the late 80s when, the mantra for some women was, oh, I don't need a man. Well, you don't need one because you've told yourself you can't get one. And so again, you tell yourself, I can survive this because I no longer have a need for this thing. A lot of that has to do with, again, faith being the only tool that was made available to us as a people here on these shores. And then ultimately, that is why you then had a denial or a reason to say, oh, I don't need to see a doctor, or people seeing that that's not something that's our norm. Well, it wasn't our norm because we weren't allowed access to that being norm for us. But it was also because we weren't allowed access to the fullness of our humanity, which allowed for us to then have the right to ask for those things for ourselves. And I think it is, even without full articulation of humanity that women or people are demanding now, it is the awareness that actually my mental health, and people say mental health, I say mental wellness, because mental health is sometimes just the acknowledgement that you have a problem that is happening in your mind. Mental wellness says I acknowledge a problem, but I'm also working on how do I do something to correct that issue so that it no longer becomes a burden to me. So mental wellness is where I'd hope for us to move to as a people, as well, as opposed to just landing at mental health and thinking that in itself is enough as well. So again, I just think it's a reflection of how we, again, try to move to surviving the very things we don't have access to. Then you tell yourself you no longer need access to those things because you can survive it, or you can make it through because the great by and by and the hand on the Lord. Like faith and health are not antithesis. So they're not in opposition to each other. They're actually complementary. It is the gifts and crafts of God that makes doctors available to us. So it is understanding that we don't have to be in opposition. They actually can be complementary things to be able to support you.
That's exactly right. So we have been having this incredible conversation about just the trauma that Black women and women have been facing. We've been talking so much about the weight, right, that women carry, that cape, that heaviness, and Black women in particular being resilient, and how do we strip some of those titles. So Tara, we're going to come into, bringing our conversation to a close, which I totally do not want to, but we really want to talk about how do we help other women. So me being a woman, helping another woman take that heaviness, that cape, the weight of that cape off. How do we do that?
It is something that I've shared with a few people as I've had these conversations. And to me, it is about finding your circle of salvation. And that is that circle of sisterhood that allows for you not only to take the cape off and not have someone else think that they need to carry it, but that you all each lay it down and allow yourselves just to stand up and stand next to, hold each other through some of the things that you're going through, acknowledging, hey, today I am stronger than you seem to be. And so today I will hold the strength for the two of us. But again, it is for today. It is not an eternity. So like we are always, it is the group that will push and pull you to the brilliance, like you all talked about. It is that group of women. And it may not be 5 or 10, it may just be 2 to 3, but however you form that circle that allows for you all to create these unbreakable bonds that allow for you to have a safe refuge for your vulnerability. It is your safe refuge for your doubt. It is that refuge for your concerns or your worries, because they are the ones who see you beyond the skin that you're in. They see to the core of who you are, and they see that thing which you have all the rights to actually be. Not only the opportunity, but you absolutely have the right to all those things that you are dreaming for yourself. So they are the ones that even when you cannot see the light or at the end of the tunnel, they turn the light on. They become the light for you and carry you through those darker moments. But that is what I would say all of us should find, that circle of salvation. I don't care if you're paying for people to be in that circle, meaning you're seeing a therapist and that person gives you the tools and the resources to pull through, but it is the formulation of your circle of salvation that allows for you to, again, be free enough to leave the weight of that cape, to remove the cape and leave it where it should be, which is, again, beneath you and not something that is weighing you down and keeping you from flying to your greatest destination.
We want to, before we head into our brilliant blessing that my girl is going to bring, we want to make sure that those of you out here that are listening today, if you are heavy laden and burdened down and weighted down, please, please, please know that you have a circle of salvation with the Beyond Brilliant team as well. Write the show. We want to hear from you. We want to be able to be a blessing to you and to pray for you as well. So please don't forget that we are also a community. Join our Beyond Brilliant network. We are, honey, we out here. We are out here, and there is power in community. So with that said, thank you, Tara. You are amazing. Dr. Nicole Steele, if you don't take us into brilliant blessing, I'll keep talking.
I am being led to Ecclesiastes 4, 9, and 10, which reads, 2 are better than 1, because they have a good reward for their toil. For if they fall, one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him who is alone when he or she falls and has not another to lift him or her up. I think, Tara, you said it powerfully, the circle of salvation. It is important, ladies, we don't journey through life alone. God did not build us to do life alone. So thank you, Tara. What a powerful, powerful word that you have dropped on our audience today. Can you let our listeners know how they can connect with you and how they can plug in to you and your team's powerful podcast, The Weight of the Cape?
So I do invite people to follow us on Facebook or also find us on Apple and Spotify for the podcast.
So Dr. D?
Yes, and yes. Well, that wraps our show, ladies. This was such a great conversation. I'm so grateful to have you, Tara, and always my purpose partner. We always have such a great time together. And as always, we like to leave you with closing our show with saying this: be bold,
be brave, and be brilliant.